Good afternoon, Mr. Cassell.
Hi there. How you doing, Martin?
I am really well, thank you. How are you?
Very well indeed. Good to see you again.
Fantastic. It's good to see you. We've just been covering how long it's been since we actually saw each other. It's been a long time.
It has been. It has been a long time. You're right.
It has been a long time. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with me. I know you from, well, I think the last time we worked together was like 2008, just before you published, was it your first book, Brilliant Selling?
Yes, that's right.
You've been giving me the headline version of what's been going on since then. So at that time, you were running a sales training company, publishing books, all those kinds of things. And I understand since then you're focused much more on presentation now. So that's going to be the focus of what we talk about today. So yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with me.
Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Okay, good. So like you know, there are only 4 questions. So we're going to be focused on presentation today. So what I'm interested to know from you is how you're qualified to talk to us about this, who it is that you work with, how you win your customers, how you deliver customer value for your customers, how you feel about kind of the whole idea of presenting, and your recommendations for people who are investing in kind of their presentation skills in the current environment and the way presentations are being delivered. But that's going to keep us busy probably for the next hour and 15 minutes. How do you feel about that?
Sounds good. Always happy to talk about both myself and presenting, Martin.
Okay, super cool. So the first question is then, how are you qualified to talk to us about presenting?
Yes. Well, the simple answer to that, I suppose, is that I'm doing it all the time, and I have done for the best part of 23 years, I think, as a coach, consultant, and trainer. So I'm doing it on a regular basis. It's my micro niche, so I'm focusing and specializing in it. So I'm creating content around it. For example, the Leader's Guide to Presenting, which we talked about just a second, which came out in 2018. That was Business Book of the Year in the UK. So that's got a lot of leverage. So I'm qualified to talk about it because I'm doing it a lot. I teach others how to do it. I coach leaders about how to present effectively. And it sort of semi-consumes my life. So I'm looking at, how the best presenters present, how they communicate information effectively. And I'm sharing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and like YouTube and other, content platforms so that I can spread the word. So that's probably the answer to your first question about how I'm qualified.
Okay, fantastic.
Your second question, who am I working with?
Whoa. We need to go slower than that, or else we're going to be done in about 4.5 minutes. So another second question. So tell me, how did you, because when we did a little bit of work for you, I think back in 2008, 2009, just before the launch of the books. So you can tell us about the books. What was that? It was a sales training consultancy that you were running. What was that called?
That was called RTP, Release the Potential.
Yes. Okay, Release the Potential.
Yeah, so obviously it's been some time since we communicated, and so a variety of things have happened since then. I've morphed, if you like, from a generalist trainer and coach into focusing on 3 core areas, really: presenting, influencing, and selling. So it's about 50% on presenting, 25% on influencing, and 25% on selling. And so I set up Jeremy Cassell Coaching in 2018, and our micro niche is C-suite individuals who want to deliver exceptional high-stakes presentations. But because I suppose of the heritage of the work I've done through the Moller Group, which is based out of Cambridge University, through RTP and my own personal background, I get involved with other projects. So, for example, I'm working with a large French company at the moment, helping to develop their sales force of just under 400 and their sales leaders. So I'm getting involved with quite some big meaty projects. But my bread and butter is working with senior people in businesses who either want to get better at presenting internally or externally. So things like virtual town halls, pitches, things that are high stakes. So that's how I've morphed. And you're right about the books. We ended up, Tom Bird and I ended up writing 4 books, and I've got a couple of books in the pipeline as well in the next 2 or 3 years. But the latest one, The Leader's Guide to Presenting, gives me a platform, if you like, to be able to talk about this stuff, and gives me the credibility to be able to work with these senior individuals in business.
Fantastic. Okay, so you were just telling me how you wanted to be an actor until you were age 21. And that interests me because this is a recurring theme in these conversations. Like, I've spoken to people who were DJs for the longest time and then stopped becoming DJs and went to a career in marketing. I know people who are comedians. I know people. It seems like everyone in sales and marketing is a want to be entertainer on some level. And it seems to me that they should all just then be presenters, so like you've gone, it seems to me, to the logical end of that journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, so up until 21, end of last year at university, I wanted to be an actor. And then I thought, quite sensibly, I've never had any regrets, that I wasn't good enough and I wouldn't probably be able to make it. So I abandoned that. And actually, I went into teaching for a few years, which, of course, there's a performance element to teaching as well. So it's an interesting point that you're raising about that. I mean, very few people go into sales and marketing as a direct result of what they do in their, formative years. I mean, I certainly had no plans of going into sales and marketing when I was at university. So most, but you've heard of the idea of the accidental salesman, and it's one of those things that it's not often a life choice, is it? It happens for a variety of different reasons. And I think, if you're selling in the same way as you talked about DJing and teaching and all this sort of thing, there is a performance element to it. You can't get away from that. So people who believe that they need to rely, for example, on the slides or the content miss the point. If I wanted to send you some information, I could just send it to you via an email or some other communication platform quite easily, and I can communicate information. But the thing that the presenter is doing is obviously bringing in the emotions, the stories, the personality, and that's critical in presenting. So you whether you like it or not, you have to be able to perform well as a presenter. I remember when what comes to mind as I'm talking about this now, what comes to mind, Martin, is when I was learning to become an NLP trainer, which was in 2005. The guy who took it, a chap called Tad James, quite a controversial guy actually, he was over in the States in LA, and one of the things he said was, you cannot have a bad day if you're a trainer. You cannot have a bad day. And what he meant by that was, you've got to always perform, because when you're presenting or training or whatever it is everything okay?
Yeah, it's all good. They can't see me when you're speaking, so I might duck around a bit. I'm trying to sort my technology out a little bit, but I'm good. You're good.
Yeah. So if you're presenting, training, whatever it is, a bit like a DJ, you can't have a bad day. You've got to perform like an actor on stage. If you have a bad day on stage and the director comes in, you might get fired. So it's the same with being a trainer. So I think there is a performance element to it. There's no question about that. And you've got to get up for it. You've got to be in a certain resourceful state to be able to present really effectively. So I think so it's interesting that a lot of the people you've had on Talk Marketing have some sort of link to performing.
It's really interesting. And I think the especially interesting thing is the teaching thing, because when I was running effective marketing, I used to get involved with, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a charity where business people would go into schools. And it was amazing. I went to Port Slade Community College, and I did it in the end like 5 or 6 times. And it's the 5 or 6 hardest days work I've ever done in my life.
Yes, I can
because
imagine.
Essentially, if you're having an off day, if you are not engaging and interesting and entertaining those kids for that 7-hour day, you're dead. They're going to eat you alive. It's like the hardest audience you will ever face in your life.
Totally
And
agree.
so I think teaching is a great platform for presenting, a great platform, because you just do it 6 hours a day. So if you believe what Malcolm Gladwell tells us, that you have to do something for 10,000 hours, 4 years of teaching will get you there. Do you know what I mean? It absolutely will, in front of the harshest audiences on the planet. So
Well,
that's
exactly.
interesting. So
Well,
how much of, yes.
So what I was going to say was, you think about going back to school, and everyone watching this, whatever they're doing in business right now, whatever their role is, will have been at school at some point in the work in their various different countries. And I don't know about you, but I could name on the fingers of one hand how many decent teachers I had. And the reality is that it may be different now, but a lot of teachers, like, there won't be that many teachers watching this, I suspect, are not brilliant. They're subject matter experts, but they're not brilliant at the positioning of it, the telling of the stories, the performance bit, the getting into a resourceful state, and really making it highly engaging for the audience, which in this case is school kids. So I think, I wouldn't position myself as an exceptional teacher back then, because I just left university, did it for a few years, and then left. So, but it definitely definitely put me in a good position to be able to do what I did after that, which is be a salesman at L'Oreal, a sales manager, a head of training at L'Oreal and Pepsi, and then doing what I do now. It definitely, I don't regret those years at all. And you're right, there is definitely a performance element to it, and there's also an engagement element. You've got to engage kids, and that's, you've got to sell the why of why history, chemistry, physics, maths, or whatever is interesting to them. I've got 3 kids, 14 to 19. They're still in the education system, and they still complain to me about boring lessons that they've had to put up with, either virtually or in person. So I don't think things have changed that much.
No, and they've got all the technology now as well, haven't they? I suppose it's interesting. So how much of sales and marketing do you think is performative? Like, how much of it is just a performance?
Well, nowadays, I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind is, nowadays you've got to be authentic, haven't you? Trust-based vulnerability, if you believe the Lencioni stuff, the team working thing is really important. You've got to be yourself. So you've got to marry the performance element of it, which is being up for it. If you're doing sales and marketing, and I'm talking about sales here, really more than marketing probably. But if you're in a position where you're in front of clients, prospective clients, and you're trying to sell yourself, it's a combination of probably being fairly high energy and performing well, so that you come across effectively, as well as all the other stuff, which is, you've got to know your product knowledge. You've also got to ensure that you are authentic, because people buy connection now. In more than any other time, I think, especially because what's happening with the pandemic and so forth. Business is personal, so you've got to connect with people, and that connection is really critical. So you can't just perform without connecting. And actually, performance done really well is about engaging with your audience. So I think it's a combination of a number of different factors.
Good. Right. So you're saying you've got to be authentic.
Yes.
So 2 things come up for me then when you say that. Is firstly, if I'm under pressure to be authentic, can I be authentic? And secondly, what if I'm just a dick? Do you know what I mean? Then I can't be myself. I have to be. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I know that everyone says this. You have to be authentic. You have to have connection. You have to be yourself. You have to all these things. But quite often I see presenters aren't that. They
I agree. Yeah, and I think it's so in the last, whatever it is, 16, 17 months, since my business sort of went like that, because of obviously the fact that all my face-to-face stuff was cancelled. I've had lots of clients who've come to me and said, here's the time to get good at presenting now. I want to rid myself of the demons and imposter syndrome and all that sort of stuff. But what at least three of them have said to me is, look, Jeremy, happy to work with you. I'll hire you as my coach, my presentation and communication coach. but don't for God's sake turn me into some sort of perfect professional. That's what three people have said that to me. In other words, the sort of recognition, the recognition that they see that there is some sort of sense of sometimes presenters being too smooth, too perfect, too professional. And actually that's not what people want. People want connection with the person. So, you really have got to be genuine, I think. And probably when you're under pressure, be even more genuine, be open and honest and share stuff that you might not normally have shared. I think that's one of the shifts that's happened in the last few years personally, and has been accelerated by the pandemic, this requirement just to be yourself. If people don't like you, fair enough, so if you're in a sales and marketing role, they don't like you, they'll move on, and you'll find out pretty quickly. But with most, whatever you're selling, whether you're self-employed, running a small business, running a tech company, whether you're a big corporate or running for working for a medium-sized business, whatever role you're in, I think that nowadays the connection bit is really critical, because if you think about it, tons of people are subject matter experts. There's presenting. My God, there's millions of companies, training companies offering presentation skills. So in my sphere, it's not necessarily about subject matter expertise, although I've written a book about it. It's more about, does that C-suite individual who's likely to hire me on the coaching side of my business, does he connect with me? Does he like me? So if I'm prepared to share stuff that allows him to think, oh, this guy's more than just some sort of professional, and also share vulnerability stuff, then there's probably going to be a greater connection. And I mean, you're an expert in marketing, Martin, so you'll know about this. And I know you wrote a lot of good stuff, and you've still got a YouTube video, I think, up on LinkedIn. In the last 15, 16 months, since March last year, I've really focused on LinkedIn as a way of, as my basic marketing platform. And I can pretty much guarantee you my top 10 posts in the last 15 months, 8 of them have been connection posts about my wedding, because I got married for the first time in January this year, my mother's 80th birthday, and I scored 100 in a cricket match, which is not bad for someone aged 56. Various different things about my personal life or about connecting with my audience. Those are the ones who attract. Those are the posts that attracted the most likes, comments, etc. So I think that's a critical element. Subject matter expertise is almost a tick nowadays. Yeah, okay, you've written a book, fair enough. Served tons of other people, but do I fancy working with this person? Do I fancy sharing issues that come up as a leader? Which is what you're going to do, even if you position yourself as a communication presentation coach. There's still going to be other stuff you're going to work with people on. So I think that being real thing is critical. And the second part of your question, well, what happens if you're a dick? I like that question. You'll be found out, basically. So that's the simple answer to that, I think. You'll be found out and you won't get clients, or you won't keep them. So you'll be found out. That's my view. And that's the same with, if you think about it, that's the same with especially sales and marketing. I mean, if I look back on my first, I was a salesman for L'Oreal for 3 years, and there's no question at all, I behaved like a dick for some of those times, absolutely no question at all. So from 25 to 28, I got into sales from teaching, and I didn't know anything about sales, just managed to blag my way into it effectively. But for example, I remember selling, I worked for L'Oreal, biggest beauty and cosmetics company in the world, and I was selling into a hairdressing salon. And I went into a particular salon, Sue's Salon in Abergavenny, because I had Wales as one of my territories. And it was close to the end of a second quarter, and I sold her far too much permanent wave. And I was doing it for purely selfish reasons. I wanted to hit my target so I could make money. And because I was able to use certain linguistic techniques and closing techniques that you probably couldn't get away with now, she bought far too much. Now, the reason I'm telling you the story is that she never paid her bill. We sued her, and she didn't quite go out of business. But I put her in. I behaved like a dick because I was purely focusing on me, on what I wanted. So she never bought from me again. And in the worst case scenario, if there'd been social media at that point, which there wasn't, a long time ago, you know, I'd have been found out because that would have been straight on social media. So I don't think you can behave like that long term if you're in sales and marketing, whether you're self-employed or whether you're working for a company. I think you've got to focus on being yourself, and if it's not enough, then you're gonna have to find something else to do probably.
Okay, good. All right, cool. That's really interesting. And I think you're right. I think you're right. I think what you were saying about speakers being too smooth, I don't think people enjoy that. I think for me, speakers, when they're pitching too hard or it's too obvious that it's a pitch, I don't think people enjoy that. So I think you're right. I think if you stand up in front of a group of people and you are a dick, then they know you're a dick almost immediately. I'm interested in LinkedIn because
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. No. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi there, I'm back.
You're back.
I think
okay, good.
You rather than me, wasn't it?
I've got no idea. I mean, I was just off to look at my router, but
You well,
doesn't.
I was still. I didn't. My side, I still was like, you know, my camera was still working, and then I just lost you. So I don't know what happened.
Okay. All right.
So
let's make hay while the sun shines. Okay, well, we'll cut this.
Quite.
Okay.
So
what I was
talking about, you were saying, yeah, you were saying, okay, so yeah, I think that's probably true, and you were talking about, yeah, if you pitch too hard or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, so people don't enjoy that. And I think if you stand up in front of a group of people and you are a dick, you get found out like really quickly. Like they know immediately that you're a dick. So, and what was the other thing? I'm interested in this LinkedIn thing because you're right. I did have a video ranking for a long time. It's had a lot of hundreds of thousands of views about how to use LinkedIn as a marketing tool. I've got a course still that talks about that, but I've not been marketing anything for 6 years. I've literally come back to this in the last 6 months, and I'm kind of astounded at the way LinkedIn has gone, because I mean, for me, the posting was never the most exciting thing about LinkedIn. But if I look at what people are posting, you call them engagement posts. So you're talking about like your wedding or scoring 100 in cricket or doing whatever that was. It seems to be all of that. And I haven't tested it, so I don't know. What I'm interested in is if you call those engagement posts, when you sit down to write them, are you thinking, I'm going to share something, some vulnerability now, some authenticity, or if people are sitting down to do that, saying, I'm going to share something really authentic, then is it at that point authentic? And does it actually work? Is there a business benefit? Have you seen a business benefit to posting in that fashion? That's what I'm interested to know.
Okay, so what the honest answer is, I don't position myself as a LinkedIn marketeer or an expert, but I focused on it a lot since March 2020 or April 2020, since the pandemic properly hit in the UK at least. And what I knew was that I had some level of control. So I decided to share a lot of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I do in terms of working with others and what I picked up over the years in relation to presenting, selling, and influencing, I basically shared content. So, you know, I went from 2,500 contacts to 5,000 contacts. I get regularly, you know, 3,000 to 6,000 views of my posts, the ones that do well, and you know, anything from 30 to 100 comments typically. I think I got about 250 comments or something when I got married. And someone told me, I can't remember who it was, Martin, but focus on 80-20, you know, the old adage. So 80% credible, 80% here's what I do, here's some sharing of stuff that I think you'll find interesting. So that's typically videos, articles, that sort of stuff. And 20%, here's some stuff I think you might be interested in. And what I try and do is link the post to something that they still might find interesting. So for example, I did a recent post, like, what was it, 3 weeks ago? My mother I went to her 80th birthday party. Of course, my dad asked me to deliver a speech, which I did. I did the A to Z of her life, and S was for sister. And I got her brother to stand up and talk about my mum, Sue. And it was a really emotional thing. John completely lost it, was in tears, everyone else was in tears. So I delivered, so my post was about what's the place of emotion in presenting, how important.
Okay.
So I linked something personal to something that I thought would be interesting to my followers, who are a whole band of different people I've sort of accumulated over the years, and it worked. So I've got lots of good content. Your sort of supplementary question, it hasn't got any direct impact on business. I've won 3 coachees in the last 9 months. These are pretty big hitting. For example, a new practice head at a top 20 law firm in the UK, who signed a 6-month contract to work with me. 3 coachees who I've never met, who I built a relationship with on LinkedIn. We then went to sort of direct mailing, spoke obviously, and they hired me. But that was because of my LinkedIn content.
Right. Okay, good. So that works. So
Yeah.
you can start to see me being very personal and vulnerable on LinkedIn. Okay, so this is nice. This leads us beautifully then into kind of how you win your clients, who your clients are, and how you deliver value for your clients.
Well, so my clients, I really only work with big corporates and professional service firms. I do a very small amount of work with SMEs, but it's about 5%. And the reason, between you and me, why I do that is because they pay more. It's as simple as that. They're more likely to pay, and it's, they've got budget. So those are my clients. The typical client, I've got a sort of a pretty much you're a marketer, you understand what an avatar is. My perfect avatar really right now is someone in a professional service firm who is in transition into a more senior role, and that role requires them to communicate and present in a different way than they have done before. So that's my sort of perfect avatar. And I picked up probably 4 of those sort of typical clients in the last, 6 months or so. I need 12 coaching clients to make the coaching element of my business work well. So I need 12 at one time. So that's who my clients are: C-suite leaders and managers who have to communicate either internally or externally via pitching, nowadays virtual town halls, change management stuff, training, anything like that. Anything where there's what I call a high stakes presentation, where there's a lot riding on a presentation. So I worked with someone recently on their first virtual town hall, to both associates and then partners. And she had just become a leader of a big practice group worth 130 million. She was pretty young, and she had to get that right, because whether you like it or not, her team, she had about sort of 60 partners coming on the first one, and I think there were 120 associates on the second one. They're going to judge her whether she likes it or not. And part of the way you get judged as a leader is how you communicate effectively. So that was a good definition of a high stakes presentation. So those are my clients. What was your follow-up question?
How you win those clients?
Yeah, so how I win them is a combination of LinkedIn, personal referrals and recommendations, building a really strong network, and a little bit of Google Ads, although I don't do very much of that. And I've done that I put together something called Design and Deliver, which is 18 videos on virtual presenting that I created in September last year, and I used Google Ads for that. And I've got a couple of clients as a direct result from that. But it's mainly, to be honest, Martin, because I've been in the business, I've been in training and coaching for 23 years now. And I've got a wide network, and I keep in touch with the network effectively. And of course, if you get into a big business and you do well with someone and they like you, then you've got a chance of getting into lots of strands of businesses. So my biggest my biggest client is Baker McKenzie, which is the largest global law firm. And you can imagine, with a business that's worth almost 3 billion US and whatever it is, 104 offices, there are plenty of opportunities. So the classic thing there is that I would go and deliver a presentation at a conference, which I get paid to do. So they give me paid work, and then I get contacted by lots of people, and I reach out to people who are in that audience, and I get further work as a result of delivering that at that conference, whether it's virtual or face to face. So I've got one in Salt Lake City booked in end of October this year, and so I'll get paid to do that and all the consultancy and stuff required to deliver a 3-day partner conference, and then I'll get more work for people hiring me on the back of delivering a conference for them.
Yes. Okay, good. So then the last part of this part is, how do you deliver value for them? And always when it's about presentations. So I've got a bit of a thing that my thing is that if you want to be successful in business, you have to be successful in your sales and marketing, but nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to do it. They really don't want to do it. But the thing with presentations is, really nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to, unless they're like you and I, and they are performers, then nobody really wants to do it. So I'm imagining that's where it starts, is that they don't actually want to be presenting. So the big question is, how do you deliver value for your customers? And the thing I'm interested in is and the other thing I'm interested in, so I'm going to make this a big thing so you can talk a lot. But the other thing I'm interested in is there actual data about people who are good at presenting doing better in their careers than people who aren't? Because I've heard that, but I haven't seen actually any evidence of that.
I've heard that. I talk about it, but I haven't got any evidence that I can point you towards straight away. But I think you're right. So I think, okay, this is quite a big question, isn't it? And how do you deliver value? You partly deliver value in terms of the benefits that working with a senior individual, which is I'm doing most of the time. So like head of sustainability at a couple of businesses, CEO of a company called Univar, which is a big chemical distribution company, managing partners, chairman. These are the sorts of people I'm I'm working with. It's partly value in the sense that if they didn't believe there was value working for you, then they would sack you. So it's partly personal benefits, and I'll talk about a couple of things. Personal benefits. So typically, you would be amazed by the number of people who get to very high positions in business who still have imposter syndrome. In other words, they don't believe they're really competent enough to do their role, or who have real fears around presenting. So it's a residual thing. All the surveys, and this is evidence-based, in either the States or the UK, the fear of presenting is either the first or the second greatest fear, behind snakes and death sometimes, but it's a big, big fear. And so if you can help rid someone of their fear of presenting so that they feel good about themselves when they present, then that has a ricochet effect on the rest of their professional lives, because they've got confidence. And if you think about it, if you're presenting and you're worried or anxious about yourself or how you're coming across, your focus is on you, isn't it? Whereas Absolutely. If you are personally self-confident and you're in what I call a resourceful state, confident, calm, open, whatever it is, whatever state you want to be in, then you're focusing on the audience and not you. So often, and it's probably the same with you when you've done training stuff, because I know you've been a trainer as well, and a communicator in your business. If you're in a resourceful state, if I'm delivering a 90-minute webinar, which I do every week pretty much to various different organizations, I'm not focused on anything in my head at all, apart from the content and the audience when I'm delivering. Because if you're feeling resourceful, you're focusing on them, because every presentation needs to be audience-centric. So it's additional confidence in that person, and that has a ricochet effect, I think. So if you're feeling better about yourself, What I mean by a ricochet effect is it has an impact on the rest of your professional life. If you're good at presenting, you maybe start getting better at one-to-one meetings, better at performance management and other things. I think if you get better at presenting, if you're a leader, it improves your authenticity, which you've already touched on and sorted out. And so you've got real personal benefits, but there's also benefits to the business. So if you get good at presenting, you're more likely to win work. So I'm working with professional service firm partners often. So they are having to deal with clients and win work. So they have to be rainmakers. They have to manage people, lead, as well as doing all the technical stuff. So you're right. They don't want to be necessarily great at presenting, but they know that they have to do that in order to win business. So part of value is winning more pitches. And so, for example, I work with a really fantastic law firm called Dinsmore in the States last year. And the head of BD contacted me, who had known before because she worked in another law firm. And she said, can you work with this group? They're pitching with some work for Microsoft. And I worked with each of the individuals who were having to be part of the team. From memory, there were 6 or 7 people. And then I worked on their scripting and then their rehearsing, and their first piece of work, which they won the mandate to work with Microsoft, was worth 1.3 million. Well, am I going to be hired again for that in that business? Yes, because so I then ended up delivering a session to their partner retreat. So I had all their partners in front of me, virtually, obviously. Why? Because I helped them win a big piece of new work. So part of value is, from a business perspective, is can you help them win work? And you can do that if you're focusing on the pitching element of presenting. And then the other thing is just, from a firm perspective, is you get better engagement. If you've got presenters who are more effective, law firms, architectural firms, surveying firms, accountancy firms do a lot of client webinars or client seminars. And if their presenters are crap, then they're gonna, they're not going to come across effectively, and their clients are less likely to use them in the future. Whereas if their presenters on those client seminars are exceptional, that rubs off in terms of what their clients think about them. So they'll have prospects and clients in the audience. So they'll retain their existing clients. That's value, and I'll help them win new clients, because whether you like it or not, people match the presenter with the content. So if you've got a perfect scenario is great content, great presenter, bang, you're gonna get hired. You're gonna get clients rehiring you and so forth. So that's quite a long answer, but there are some real you've got to focus in terms of value on impact on individual to make them feel more both competent and confident, and then impact on the business in a practical way, which is why I tend to focus on high stakes presentations that really matter. And then you're going to get if they get great feedback or win work, they're going to recommend you. So I'm just working with an architectural firm called PRP. I'm working with one of their practice heads, and the head of HR, the head of L&D have now contacted me because they want to run a training for another 6 to 12 of their staff, because of the work I've done with the practice head, who's then recommended me internally.
Great answer, long answer. And what you're saying is long answer, but what I've always no, but I asked you like 5 questions.
This is a long form thing, so you're okay with a long answer, hopefully, Martin.
I'm okay with long answers. I'm really okay with long answers. But what you're saying about the fear of presenting, which is what what I was kind of driving at, not like people don't want to be great presenters. Of course, they want to be great presenters, but they don't want to present in the first place. And what I've always told people, and what I've always felt, is that if you are nervous before you stand up in front of a group of people, you've got it completely wrong. It actually doesn't have anything to do with you. It's everything to do with the audience. And if you're focused on the audience, then you can't be nervous, And it's not even about the content. It's always about the audience. So that's nice to hear that confirmed from you. I've got a completely inappropriately titled presentation on presenting skills. It's completely inappropriately titled. It's Present Like a Mother is what I say. And that's kind of what you have to do, I think, is you have to own it. You have to be in charge. You have to be leading the pack, because if you're not, someone else is going to take control and then you're dead.
Yes, yes, you're
So,
right. But it
yeah,
starts with you. So you're right. You've got to focus on the audience, and it's all about the audience. But it starts with you, because if you're not in a resourceful state and you're fearful or anxious or worried or consumed by nerves, you're not focused on the audience. So it's got to start with you. You've got to take responsibility and be accountable for the fact that a margin doesn't jump into your body before you're about to present. You have got to find ways, and this is the stuff I share with people and teach them about how to get into a resourceful state.
good. Okay, so I'm interested in this because I don't know if you've ever seen me present. I love presenting. I absolutely
remember
love
you're a
it.
good presenter. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you. I was just about to tell you that I'm a good presenter, but I don't think I am. But I don't think I am in the sense of, like, no law firm's going to employ me to present. It would go horrible. But I've always enjoyed it. So this is the question: is how much of this is natural? Because I've never attended a presenting course. No one's ever spent a second telling me how to present. I just got the opportunity to do it a bit, stole some things from other people, came up with some things of my own, and it's always worked. You know, I bombed once, I think, in Chichester, breakfast meeting. There were 60 people there, and I think they decided they didn't want to see me before I even stood up. But anyway, I didn't even bomb. It was it took them a long time to get warmed up. So how much of this is natural and how much of this can be taught? And the challenging question, because I really like to challenge people, is if you're teaching people, is it then authentic?
Yeah, that last point, yes, you can still be authentic even though you've been taught something.
Okay.
But I take your basic point. For example, Gordon Brown was famously taught how to communicate more effectively, and he came across as inauthentic. You know,
Yes.
so it's so that there is always that issue around authenticity. I take your point about that. I think you're raising a really interesting question, and what you said as part of your preamble there is critical. You said, and I quote you on this, I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed presenting. Now, that's where I want to get people to when I'm working with them, that they end up enjoying it. Because if you enjoy something, surprise, surprise, it's going to go better, isn't it? You know, you can't, if you play tennis or golf or do any other pursuit or whatever, you're not enjoying it, you're not going to continue doing it for very long. You know, pretty obvious, isn't it? So that's where you've got to get to. Now, let's have a think about this. You know, let's say someone comes, you know, my perfect scenario, my perfect avatar, someone has been promoted. They're now in a position of additional responsibility, managing, leading people. They're there often because of their technical expertise, subject matter expertise. They might be good at leading people. They aren't necessarily great presenters. And as I said, some people may position themselves initially as, I don't enjoy it, I wish I wouldn't, I wish I didn't have to do it. A lot of professionals are like that, partly in some professional organizations because there's a high preponderance of introverts. So you've got whereas you and I probably would describe, I suspect you would describe yourself as an extrovert. I describe myself as an extrovert. Myers-Briggs terminology, I'm an E, you know, you'd probably be an E. Lots and lots of professional service firm partners that are introverts. But as a coach, I have to work with certain presuppositions, and those are guiding principles that allow me to do my job effectively. And one of them is that exceptional presenters are made, not born. Because if I believed otherwise, I couldn't be a coach, could I, Martin? If you think about it. So there are a certain number of people who, for a variety of different reasons, enjoy presenting and are good at it. One of the reasons I was because I acted in plays from the age of 9 to 21 every single year. So I was used to standing up on stage and performing. So there's no question that helped me rid myself of any residual fears I may have had about presenting. So that's definitely contributed to me being able to present well. However, I strongly believe it's all learnable. So the reason I set up this business actually was because if you think about all the things you can teach someone who's a manager or a leader, time management skills, coaching skills, leadership skills, delegation, whatever it is, I firmly believe that business presenting is both the most important thing and the one where you can get biggest changes quickly. So I've worked with numerous people who have changed the way they present because they've got rid of their fear element, and also have changed the way they present in terms of their content or their structure and all that sort of stuff. So I'm firmly in the camp of, whilst you may be able to present well because of your teaching background and because of your performing background of some kind, or you want to be in the limelight, or you're naturally an extrovert. It's not just about that. I've seen tons of really good introverts present brilliantly. So I don't believe that's the case. So it's a combination of getting into the right state, a resourceful state, having superb content, and then communicating it in the right way. And you can learn all those things. I strongly believe that. And of course, I work with lots of people who've got better and better and better. So I've got evidence anecdotally that is the case. And if you look at, or even if you look at some great, superb presenters and communicators, let's take an Obama or something. He's a brilliant communicator. I think most people would agree with that. If you look at his trajectory from being the presidential candidate for the Democrats through to the end of his two-term presidency, he definitely improved. I mean, some of his presentations towards the end were absolutely outstanding, although his initial inauguration ceremony was great as well. So he definitely improved, and he was brilliant anyway, but he improved. And I've got numerous examples of that. And the beauty of what I do is, especially virtually nowadays and online stuff, is that leaders can send me stuff which I can then review. So I can say to them, if you sent me something, I'd say, Martin, okay, here are the things I think you're doing really well, and here are some things to work on. I did it just yesterday where someone sent me a link to a virtual town hall they delivered, and I went through it, picked out the things I think worked really effectively and the things they could improve on. And the smaller things, she then said, okay, great, thanks for sharing. And it's the critical final element, before I come back to you, is the individual who is wanting to get better at presenting, are they really up for it? Are they really motivated or engaged? So you could have put your hand up. Someone could put their hand up and go, I'll hire you, or my company wants me to get better. And I've had a few of those. I've had, at least in the last 3 years, I've had at least 4 people who I worked with who weren't up for it. They couldn't give a shit, really. They weren't really up for getting better. They didn't buy into the fact that their business had said, you need to get better at this, or they didn't buy into the why of presenting is really a really important part of leadership and communication. So the final element of it is that person highly motivated to want to improve? If they are, then that combination of high motivation and a skill that can be picked up and learned, gradually, means that you can get pretty huge improvements within 6 months.
Okay, good. And I'm with you. And I think like people who are naturally good at it, I think it's okay for you to be a presenting coach and there be born presenters, because there are always going to be people who are much better technically at what they do who need to present without. So I don't think that's a moral question. I'm interested in you'll call it a resourceful state.
Yes.
There's a book, isn't there? You know the book. Is it Mahali? I've never known how to pronounce his name.
I don't understand how but he talks about the flow state.
The flow state. And for me, when I'm presenting, that is absolutely, more than anything I've ever done in my life, my A1 state. That is when I am performing the best. I'm most awake, I'm most tuned in, I'm most engaged, I'm most happy. So that's interesting. You call that a resourceful state.
So the idea of a resourceful state comes from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Okay. So it's about, so a state is a combination of our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, how we're feeling in our body, whatever. That's a state. And in order to present well, you've got to be in a resourceful state. So take the flip side of it. If you're anxious, nervous, fearful, worried, that's an unresourceful state, isn't it? Because that's going to impact directly in a negative way on the way you present. Whereas if you're confident, calm, focused on the audience, whatever, that's a very different state.
Yes.
And so that's where you've got to, and some people can do that quite naturally and easily. So if you know, everyone can get into the flow state. Children are in the flow state often. You're right. I'm exactly the same as you. If I'm delivering a webinar, which I do pretty much weekly, I go into that flow state. So the people who are around me, people who are helping me with Mentimeter, which is a bit of interactive engagement software that we typically use, they'll come and go, you know, that was great. Well done, Jeremy. That's brilliant. And God, I can't believe you mentioned that. And I go, did I mention it? Because I'm in such a flow state, I don't even quite know what is going to come out of my mouth when I'm talking, even if it's really properly rehearsed well, because I might just suddenly flip into another story or just dependent on what I think is appropriate in the moment. And so you can get into, you know, a good mate of mine, a chap called Neil Malarkey. I don't know if you remember him. He was the guy who with Mike Myers started the Comedy Store in Leicester Square. He was in partnership with Mike Myers, who's his best friend, and he's an improvisation expert. And state for them is even more critical. You know, Whose Line Is It Anyway? You know, all those people.
Yes.
So improv, which he still does, he does it every Wednesday and Sunday when he's allowed to in Leicester Square. And you know, improv, you've got to be in a really resourceful state, because if you're thinking, oh my God, I hope the audience don't give me this as the cue, or don't set up that, or in a worried state, there's no way you can just be in the moment and make up a scene from scratch based on the quick information that the audience give you. So it's quite possible to get into a resourceful state. So I work with people on how to do that.
Okay, good. You don't have to tell us how.
I'll quite happily tell you how. If you think that's of interest, I can give you some ideas.
I think it's of interest. Don't people pay you hundreds of pounds an hour to tell them this stuff?
Yes, I'm quite happy to share that. I'm on the basis I'm with you here, Martin. I'm happy to share content here, so that's fine.
Perfect.
So a number of different things you can do, and people who get into a flow state do this naturally, and there's a variety of different things. I'm going to give you just a couple of ideas here, and tell me when you've had enough. The basis of a resourceful state is breathing. And if there was someone online now who was anxious or nervous, I could pretty much guarantee that upper body breathing. They're breathing from up here. You can even see them going like this sometimes. So you've got to get them diaphragmatically breathing from a decent base. And I think that's about 50% of it, actually. If I'm breathing now, and I'm accessing my diaphragmatic breathing, in other words, breathing into my stomach area, the muscle under my stomach, breathing into my diaphragm, it's very difficult for me to be fearful, nervous, stressed. Yeah. So you think anyone who's in a stressful state, that upper body breathing. So the first thing is make sure people are breathing properly. So I teach people breathing patterns, like the Hawaiian breathing pattern, which is in for 7 through the mouth, hold for 7, out for 7, giving a roar with it. That's so breathing is one. A simple other thing is to look up. So I get people to look up, if they're right-handed, look up left if they're left-handed. This is all about eye accessing cues of NLP. If you look up, and you could test this, anyone who's watching this as a video, you can test this. If you have got a worry or a thought and you look down, you're accessing either internal thinking or you're going into your feeling state, and you get even more worried, which is why you get stressed people or worried people or depressed people. They look down a lot. If you look up right, you're accessing the visual, creative element of your brain, and you're much less likely to feel fearful. So if you think about it, what a lot of people do when they're presenting, or just in the last 5 or 10 minutes before they're presenting, they look down. So look, if I've got a script here, it's just a bit of paper, but if I'm looking down thinking, oh shit, what am I about to say? Oh my God, I'm looking down, I'm going to get myself into a resourceful state. You've done your prep by then. So I get people just to look up into the corner of the room, if they're right-handed, look up right, and just notice that they start feeling creative, imaginative. They're looking forward to the future, whatever. They're not fearful. Another little technique is for people who genuinely say, I always get nervous. I'm a nervous presenter, or I'm anxious, or whatever. Anxiety and excitement are very close neighbors. So if someone is nervous, I get them to go, so they say, I always get nervous. I go, okay, what I want you to do is in the 10 minutes before you're about to present, I want you to say, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. And they move, because it's so close, they end up feeling excited. And they're actually telling their brain to feel excited rather than nervous, because it's so close together. So actually excitement is like nerves. So that's another thing you can do. Amy Cuddy, have you come across Amy Cuddy, Martin?
No.
Okay, Amy Cuddy and power poses. So if you look up on TED Talks, Amy Cuddy TED Talks, it's the most popular. I think it's the second most popular TED Talk after Ken Robinson, and she talks about. She's a Harvard professor of leadership professor, and she's interested in. She's a social anthropologist, and she's interested in the leadership qualities in both animals and humans. And what she noticed was that we know that if you start thinking anxiously, that will create feelings of anxiety. But what she suggests was if you get into a strong body position, so she's got like 5 different positions, which it's difficult for me to illustrate precisely, but anyone wanting to find out more, just go on to Amy Cuddy TED Talks. There are 5 power poses that she gets into. And if you hold that, she's done some primary research. If you hold that for 2 minutes, you are likely to increase testosterone and decrease cortisol in the body. And so you're going to get into a much more resourceful state. So look, those are four ways. There are plenty of others in which you could just teach people. And that's what people pay me to do, partly, to help them have a sequence. So if they've got like half an hour before their presentation, they know what to do to ensure that when the lights go on, when they step on the stage, if they're doing a keynote or someone presses record or the webinar starts, they start in a highly resourceful state, an up state, high energy, bang, they go from the start. And that's really important because so many presenters start really badly and lose the audience in the first 5 minutes. And it's often because they're in an unresourceful state, they're not feeling good about themselves, and they're trying to sort of get the audience to go, oh, please like me, please like me. Whereas the audience are thinking, fuck you, just get on with the bloody content. I want to find out what you've got to say. They're not interested in your state. They're interested in, is this person going to help me, whatever the subject matter is? Sales, marketing, some sort of internal change program, a change in project, whatever it is. They're not interested in you. They're interested in the content.
Exactly. Okay. And this is what I've always thought. And so if I don't have to, I've actually stolen that without even knowing it. I used to have to deliver a presentation called I'm in the Mood for Selling, which was all about getting people with their arms stretched and their heads up in the air and then hitting them with the Nolans, see if I could get them dancing. So I stole that without knowing it. So if I've never had to do any of this stuff, if I've never felt anxious or worried or concerned, if I've never rehearsed, then I'm just lucky, am I? But you teach people all this stuff.
Well, no, you're not, because remember, your basic what's underpinning you is what you said. I've always enjoyed presenting.
Yes.
So that is your working principle. That's your mindset with this, and that's gonna. So that if you enjoy something, it's like if I enjoy playing tennis, I'm going to go and play tennis more. I'm going to like to get better. If I enjoy setting up YouTube videos, I'm likely to do more of them. If I do more interviews, I'm probably going to get better at interviewing if I enjoy doing it. So that is your basic presupposition. So you're lucky because your basic building block is in place. Most people I speak, no, not most, that's unfair. A lot of people I speak to don't enjoy presenting. So they wish it was something they didn't have to do, as you rightly pointed out earlier on. But if they get better at it and they improve their competence and they get better feedback and their audience reaction is more favorable, they're going to start enjoying it more. And I've got plenty of people who've come back to me 3 months, 6 months, a year later, having started working with them going, you're right. I now enjoy presenting.
Yes.
And of course, I then say to them something like a supplementary question, which, so how is presenting for you now? It's easy. You know, it's
Yes.
straightforward. I've got no issues
Yes.
about it. I know how to do it. So the question is just then about structural. So how do you build a presentation? How do you create messages, which is totally different. But you've got past that basic interference, which is, I feel shit about presenting. I'm not, or a classic one is, I'm not a good presenter. You know, I've got lots of skills, but I just can't present. I'm not a natural presenter. All this sort of bollocks. And it is bollocks because it's just a made up version of what you think is true about yourself. But the problem is that you then walk around believing it is true, and that impacts on your ability to be able to deliver an effective presentation. I mean, you know, I'll just give you a simple example against me here. I have a pretty strong belief that I'm not very good at DIY, partly because my dad was pretty ferocious with me when I was growing up, and he was pretty good at DIY. I couldn't believe I wasn't any good. My brother was really good. Actually, my son Ben is a brilliant DIY guy. I'm not very good at DIY. Do you think I do lots of DIY around the house? No. I get someone else to do it. I have to pay other people, or indeed my wife is better than me at DIY, because I'm walking around with the belief that I'm not very good at it. And actually, I do sort of, I'm not as bad as I was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but I still don't believe I'm very good. So I'm not gonna go to IKEA and buy a bed that I have to put up myself, because I'm walking around with the belief I'm not very good at it. I might go and buy it at IKEA, but I'll get someone else to put it up. Or what my son Ben, who's now 16, but when he moved into the house that we're in right now, he said, Dad, I want a new bed. I said, fine. Where do you want it from? IKEA. We went to IKEA, which I didn't enjoy for various different reasons. But anyway, we bought the IKEA and he put it up. It took him about 3.5 hours. He was brilliant at it because he puts everything out nice and neatly. And I said to him, you know, I looked at him in total amazement, but how do you do that? I went, it's fun, Dad. I enjoyed it. So
I'm
surprise,
also
surprise.
terrible at DIY.
Well, there we go. So you're not going to be putting up lots of IKEA beds, you know, but if you see the obvious and basic link there. If you don't think you're good at something, or you don't enjoy it, or whatever, you're not going to get better at it.
Yeah.
And
I'm pretty sure I was in a relationship once that ended because I confessed that I wasn't able to plumb a washing machine. It went from, because I made my scrambled eggs, which are amazing, and then it went from that to, oh, you can't plumb a washing machine. Okay, good. I just want to come back to the point you made earlier, which was about whether we are extroverts or introverts. The one time this was tested, I was at an event and there were about 40 people there. And it was like a presentation. It was an accelerated learning thing, like a really quick learning thing. And basically, we had to go around the room at one point and then say to each other, bump into each other and say to each other if we thought they were extrovert or introvert. And interestingly, the room was almost 50-50 split between people who'd seen me present and people who hadn't. And nobody who had seen me, everyone who saw me present said I was an extrovert, and everyone who hadn't said I was an introvert. So I quite like that. You know, either I'm leading the room or I'm not. Definitely not, because I was that arsehole kid at school that disrupted all the lessons and stuff, and I learned that lesson long and hard. Okay, good. I feel like we should talk about content, but I don't know. Are you running a clock? Have you got any idea how long we've gone?
No, I'm not. Just hang on 1 second, Martin. I've got to go and rescue my wife. Just hang on 1 second.
Okay.
My wife has just been locked out of the house for an hour. I just noticed her going like this.
For an hour?
Back of the window. Yeah, apparently she claims that she just forgot to pick up the keys and lock the back door.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, we definitely started an hour and a half ago, but I think we probably chatted for 15 minutes before. So yeah. I'm interested because I think the other way that I am lucky in this is that I'm quite good at understanding things and translating them into ways that other people understand them. So I don't know how I got to be good at this, and I only think that I'm good at this because I've done it, I don't know, thousands of times now, where I've stood up in front of groups of people and said, if you thought about it like this, then you'd do better at it. And I'm quite a conspiracy fan. You know, I do enjoy a conspiracy, and I kind of share my knowledge in a conspiratorial sort of a way. So I'm a lecturer with the Digital Marketing Institute, and essentially the theme of my teaching then is, this is how these corporations, Facebook, Google, Twitter, whatever, this is how they're going to try and rob you of your money, and this is how you're going to keep it and be more successful, more effective, which they really enjoy and they really have come to understand. How important is content, and how do you come up with content, and can you do this in like 5 minutes, or do we need to schedule a part 2 where we do this at some point in the future?
Well, we can continue, and you can edit some of it out, can't you? Surely. We can do potentially part 2.
Not editing anything, Jeremy. Nothing gets edited. Everything goes in.
Okay.
Even the bit where you rescued your wife.
Fair enough. Well, content is important. So, you know, what's critical in a presentation is the presenter's state and how the presenter behaves, and then the content is equally important, because you could have an outstanding presenter, but if the content is really poor, you're not going to get traction, are you? And you're not going to get continuity, or not going to get people to buy. So you've got to get a combination of the two, you know, heart and mind, etc. So content is really important. And in presenting terms, what I tend to teach and suggest is less is more. So I'm a strong believer that less is more, and that a lot of presentations, if you think about it, either virtually or in person, what often can happen in the presentation is that people get either bored, confused, or suffer from cognitive overload. Boredom, confusion, or cognitive overload. It happens all the time. And the boredom and confusion, the boredom bit is about the presenter making sure that the audience is in a curious state, because there's two states, the audience state and the audience state, and you're trying to get them to be curious. So I teach people about things like a spike, which we can talk about a bit more in a minute. But one of the big issues in terms of content is cognitive overload. In other words, in a short period of time, so 20-minute presentation, an hour, whatever it is you've got, a big mistake is to try and pack too much content into a presentation. And the reason it's important, the reason that's so critical, is the 7 ± 2 rule. So you may or may not have come across this, but there's a chap called Wilson who wrote a paper in 1956 called the 7 ± 2 rule. And what he postulated in that paper was that in a short period of time, any presentations are short, isn't it? 20 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour max, probably. Most people cannot take in more than 5 to 9 key points. So if you want to be memorable, you've got 5 to 9 key points. And if you think about any presentation you've seen recently, Martin, I could suspect if it was over a week old, you can't remember more than 2 or 3% of whatever you've watched. So what people do is they pack content in, rather than focusing on who's in the audience, what do they want, what's important to them, what content's going to be useful in this situation. And then what I do is I reduce it down, so it's just key messages. And what I say to my coachees and people on training courses is, if you can utilize the power of 3, even better. So you'll have sure come across the power of 3. You know, most people remember things in 3. It's the number, it's the magic number. You know, location, location, location. It's the NHS. It's you know, a lot of sales and marketing. You're worth it. I'm loving it. All these sorts of things are constructed in 3s because it's the most memorable way of capturing information. So if you can stand up and say, look, whatever the subject matter is, there are 3 core areas I'm going to focus on. You can then go into side alleys on those 3 core areas. The audience will love you, and it's much more likely to be memorable. So, for example, I've written a book called the C-Cube Model of Influencing, and it's about 3 elements of influencing: confidence, credibility, and connection, 3 C's. And people remember it because it's easy. And I can talk about that for an hour. And what I want them to remember is the 3 the 3 C's: confidence, credibility, connection, and then some elements linked to that. So the short answer to that question is less is more. Reduce your content and focus on the key stuff that you want to be able to communicate to the audience. The audience have always got a chance to ask you for additional information if they want it.
Yes. Okay, good. And I think, bullet points, everyone hates bullet points. And I think too strong a pitch, unless it is a pitch presentation, like I've properly got in a mood when I've realized that a presentation is just a pitch. They want me to buy something. Okay, cool. I think we've done our time today, so I'm not concerned about, I think if you're happy to come back and talk to us more about content in the future, that would be really cool. I'm kind of also interested in the NLP element and how you weave that in and how effective that might be. So if you are interested to come back in the future, I'd be really interested to have that conversation.
Looks like there might be a part 2, Martin.
There might be a part 2. There's a number of part 2s coming down the track actually already. So it seems like an hour and 15 minutes isn't long enough for everyone to get everything out that they're good at. There's a whole other question that we haven't got to yet, which is kind of recommendations for the current situation. Do we do that in part 2 or do we do that now? How long does it take you to answer that question?
What's the question?
The question is the current situation, the pandemic, the lockdowns, all of this stuff, the pressures that businesses are under. How do people go? What's your recommendation for how people conduct themselves, how they engage? Like, if that's just presentations, that's fine. Like, clearly the whole medium of presentations has changed. If that's how they conduct their business, then that's also fine. I'm interested to know what you think.
Well, my view of that is fairly straightforward. I think we are globally, especially in certain types of professions as well, entering into a completely new orbit, and we're entering into what most people have described as a hybrid working existence. So part office, part home. And so my view is that if you're a business professional or you're in sales, or if you're working for a large corporate, an SME, a medium-sized business, if you have interactions with clients, with decision makers, and your part of your role is influencing, and let's face it, most roles are about influencing, you've got to get really good at both virtual presenting and virtual influencing and in-person influencing and presenting. And so that includes both selling and presenting or pitching, because it's going to be both from now on. So look, I've just said I've got this gig in October in Salt Lake City, but most of that's the only in-person gig I've got this year. It'll happen more next year, no doubt. But I'm working on the presupposition that I'll be working virtually and in person, and the decision makers will decide, who give me work, will decide whether is it more appropriate to do it virtually or in person. And I think that applies to lots of situations. So my view of things is we're not going to go back to the way it was before, as in business conducted face-to-face exclusively. It's going to be a lot around, getting the balance between virtual and in person, and you've got to get really good at both. So that's my simple answer to that. And in terms of what I can offer around that, I've created this thing called Design and Deliver, which is an 18 video program that can help you maneuver and upskill around all aspects of virtual presenting. So 18 3 to 5 minute videos with lots of learning resources behind it. So you can find out more about that at jeremycasselcoaching.com. Of course, you can hire me, or you can come along. I do sorts of public trainings as well for various different organizations where there's no cost, where I'm just putting myself out there from time to time. I do about one of those every quarter. So a variety of different ways of working with me. Whenever anyone sees this, whether it's in 2021 or much later than that, I'll probably be still doing the same thing for the next 5 or 6 years, I suspect, before I hang up my presenting boots. So in answer to your question, I think it's about getting really good at this new world, this new hybrid world, and just accepting that is going to be the future for a lot of people. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of people in business. You've got to get really good at selling, influencing, presenting in a new hybrid world.
Good. And you slipped that little pitch in beautifully, like a speaking professional.
Felt I had to, Martin.
Jeremy, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I knew I would. I hope you've enjoyed it also.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there is probably a part two in this. I think if you think there is, I mean, I'm interested in the NLP thing. I'm interested in we haven't really covered the online thing, and I'm interested in the content thing. So maybe in 2 or 3 months' time, you'll be happy to come back and do this again.
Of course I will.
I think this has been hugely interesting for me, and I hope it's going to be really interesting and useful for the people who pick this up. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks a lot for inviting me along to talk marketing. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Jeremy. Bye.
Cheers.